It's been a turbulent week in Spain after the people of Catalonia went out to vote in an independence referendum on Sunday. The Spanish government didn't consider it a legal vote and police were sent there, and this happened. Things turned violent as they clashed with voters. Well, Barcelona actually had a game scheduled for that day at the Camp Nou against Las Palmas, and they chose to play it behind closed doors. Gerard Pique, he's always pretty vocal in moments like these, both on matters on and off the pitch. He voted earlier in that referendum and described the experience as the worst day ever as a professional player. There you see he was brought to tears after that game when he was interviewed. The day after that, he trained with the Spanish national team, and he was actually jeered, you can hear it, of course, by a lot of supporters there from Spain. After that, he held a 30-minute press conference yesterday to answer questions relating to the incident, because he said he didn't want his teammates on the Spanish team to be burdened by those questions. Well, at this moment, let's bring in Sid Lowe. Sid, what was your reaction, or what was the biggest takeaways from that presser from Piqué?
Well, obviously the first thing is that Piqué was trying to calm things down a little bit, try and take the pressure away from teammates, because every single question was about him. The focus was all about him. He said, well, look, rather than them doing it, I'm going to do this. I think he wanted to try and prevent this getting out of hand tomorrow night in Alicante when Spain play against Albania. I think the takeaway from it was that he spoke with, I think, a certain degree of clarity. I think he was very reasonable in what he said. He essentially expressed the idea that what he had done and what people were on his back for wasn't so grave, really, that he had said he had gone out to vote, but that doesn't necessarily make him a supporter of independence. He said that he does identify with the Spanish national team, that he wants to be in the Spanish national team, and fundamentally, of course, the top line is that he said he wasn't going to walk away from the Spanish national team. Now, all of that was fine up to a point. I think a lot of it was reasonably convincing. There are a couple of sticking points, though. One of which was that when he was asked really direct questions about his kind of, if you like, implication with Spain as a nation, if not necessarily as a national team, he kind of avoided the question a little bit. So to give you an example, he was asked that if Spain was to get, if Catalonia was to get independence, who would he play for, Spain or Catalonia? And he said, well, look, I imagine that this would be a process. There would be a process, and that process would be at least 3, maybe 4 years long, by which time I'd be 33 or so it's not something I'm going to have to deal with, which, of course, is one way of not giving an answer at all. And then the other thing he said, which I think actually did jar a little bit in the midst of a press conference, which was largely very reasonable, largely very sensible, and in which he called for dialogue. He wanted people to discuss and talk about the positions. The one thing that jarred a little bit for me was that he was asked again whether he would vote yes or no, or had voted yes or no, and he said, I'm not going to tell you that. That's the million-dollar question, which, of course, he's perfectly entitled to say that he's not going to tell anyone what he voted. He said, if I did that, I would lose half of my supporters. And I must say, at that point, I think that jarred a little bit, because it became, rather than him being able to take the, if you like, the high ground of saying, look, I don't tell you who I vote. This is a democracy. You don't tell people which way you vote. To kind of frame it in terms of losing his own supporters, I think sat a little uneasily with some people, and that ambiguity didn't entirely win people over.